think of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, you probably think of one of three things. One, the overplayed out memes and bits that are not that funny, but just funny enough to pass when you see them getting a hearty out of it. Two, the very noticeable art style and stylization that is replicated even when referenced in other media because of how iconic it is. Or three, the iconic characters, generally the main characters such as Jotaro, Polnareff, Jolene, and Josuke. But today I'm here to talk about a more iconic face. An unsung hero, a man known for his nobility. That of course being the progenitor, the start of it all, Jonathan Joestar. Now when it comes to part 1, there are a lot of mysteries, okay? What happened to Speedwagon's hat? How exactly did Zeppeli teleport? And sometimes even
Chinese niggas got something to do with it?
But that's besides the point, because today, the mystery that we are trying to answer is, what does it take to be a Joestar? This is the journey of Jonathan Joestar, from luck to pluck. Welcome to part 1. I've had to re-record this video a few times now. Right now we're going to be talking about influences. And to warn you ahead of time, my throat is kind of fucked up, so if my voice kind of gives out a little bit or I sound weird in this recording, well, that's why. So if you're wondering why my voice is a bit... that's why. So without further ado, let's get into part 1. I know a lot of you, and by a lot of you, I mean, it's Jojo, so probably not a lot of you, but there are definitely some people. But most people, we can all agree on this because we've all done it. Look up long videos and video essays and, you know, lore deep dives and stuff on things we know nothing about. That's just, it's an interesting thing. You get sucked into a rabbit hole that you don't have to pay too much attention to. So, if you're not familiar with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, this part 1 segment's going to help you out a little bit. So, we're going to be talking about influences. And what I mean by influences is things that kind of inspired JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and you can kind of see the dichotomy of characters and kind of relate it to something you may know. So, small one. Well, small at the beginning of the series, but as time goes on, they're kind of hand in hand. Castlevania. I don't think I really need to elaborate on that much. You know, the story of the eternal conflict with the vampire king, and they're kind of hand in hand, but I feel like there's already a video on that probably covers that better than me, and this is just glancing over that anyways, because the thing here that really matters is Fist of the North Star and Kinnikuman. Two very big influential shonen of the time, but also have direct influence on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, especially by a gigantic margin. Fist of the North Star, okay? It's even to the point where Jonathan's design is basically just Kinshiro. Granted, his character is more of a mixture of Kinshiro and Toki, while his relationship with Dio is obviously a reference to that of Kinshiro's relation with Shin, but combining the aspect of the brother that respects his younger brother with Rao. So think of Dio as a combination of Rao and Shin, and Jonathan as a combination of Kinshiro and Toki. This is important to their characters because of how their characters kind of act. They do get a lot of semblances from those 4 characters in specific. There's also a few other things that are referential to Fist of the North Star in this part, such as a few moments even. Like, in my mind, I especially have one right now. I can probably find a panel for it. And the scene is set up, and he even talks like Kinshiro. So, there you go. Now that we've got the biggest influence out of the way, keep in mind that a lot of things in this part of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure are related to Fist of the North Star in some way, shape, or form, because it all kind of loops together you really see the influence there, and it's not a bad thing. There's plenty of series that are influenced by Fist of the North Star, even to the same extent as JoJo's. One example coming to mind is Berserk, heavily influenced by Fist of the North Star, even to the point where Griffith and Guts are based on Kinshiro and Shin. But that's for another video. Now let's get into the actual juice of the fucking video, the actual content. Let's move on over to part 2. Welcome to part 2, Inherited Will. Now, here we're going to be talking about something that is very big in the JoJo series and a lot of anime series as a whole. I actually have a video that I made a very, very long time ago about Inherited Will and the connection between One Piece and JoJo over on my second channel. The link will be in the description, but I want to talk specifically right now, right here, about the things that impact Jonathan's journey. And then we'll get into talking about the actual character in part 3. So when it comes to Inherited Will, it's a big thing in JoJo's, and like I said, in a lot of manga as a whole. Honestly, I could do an entire series about what Inherited Will is when it comes to different shows and characters that represent concepts of it. Honestly, wouldn't mind that. You guys let me know in the comments. Now, Inherited Will is a big thing in the series. Something that resonates very closely with every Joestar. And I will try not to talk too much about other Joestars right now. That is a reason that I had to re-record this video already once, as I kind of got into a whole tangent about the Joestars as a whole instead of just Jonathan. I really want to make this just a Jonathan video. But basically, the whole thing behind Joestars is their guardian deity, their protector god, is the goddess of love, which is very important because that is one trait that all Joestars share, starting with George, honestly, not even Jonathan, but Jonathan really, like, you see it with Jonathan, right? You watch him grow up, and you watch his experience with that being the Joestar's motto. But, long story short, that is basically what gives them the ability to inherit will the way they do. And again, it is something that is somewhat inspired by Fist of the North Star. As Jonathan, as he goes on this journey, as he lives his life, gets different bits and pieces of things from different people, and it all culminates into what he does towards the end of the series. Such as, and great examples of this, are the namesake of the video, From Luck to Pluck, when he defeats Bruford. I don't remember which one's which. I think it's Bruford. There's Targus and Bruford. I think it's Bruford. Is it Targus? It's gotta be Bruford. Bruford. The nigga with the hair. Okay. And he fights that guy. And he ends up beating him and restores his humanity before he dies. And he passes him, and this is a very literal form of this, but he passes him his sword that said luck on it, and then he said, I also grant you this, and he writes Pluck on it with his blood. That is a very literal interpretation of inheriting will. He is inheriting the will of the warrior Bruford. Other important moments that show this are obviously the moment with Zeppeli, where he transfers all of his Hamon energy over to Jonathan. The death of his father, George Joestar, when he vows to take revenge for him on Dio. But I wouldn't call it revenge, because see, revenge is usually a very, very selfish thing, and this is gonna get a little philosophical for a second, but hang with me. Revenge is usually done out of some form of negative bloodlust, some form of hatred, a grudge. But Jonathan, despite all the shit with him and Dio, he was still raised to be his brother. He did not hate him. Even in his final moments, he did not hate him. And so, it's not necessarily vengeance that he was taking for his father when he died. It was more so, like, something he had to do. It was to put his father to rest. It was to show his father that he wasn't wrong. And so, that's why he has to fight Dio. That's why this battle has to happen. And yes, there is a bit of vengeance there. There is a bit of hatred there, but he does not explicitly hate Dio. He thinks Dio is a disgusting, vile being, but he does not hate him at his core. But he does carry the will of his father to prove that his father was right for what he did, even at the end. Not to mention the especially literal George's spirit being present in the mansion as it's burning. Then there's, I guess technically Dyer, because he watches Dyer die, but like, what the fuck does he do, man? He literally appears for like 3 chapters. I don't know. But essentially, all of these people culminate in Jonathan becoming who he is. And speaking of who Jonathan is, let's get into part 3. Jonathan's humanity. But before we get to the next part, come on now, y'all already know what I'm gonna say. Everybody gotta do it. Everybody who make a YouTube video gotta do it. Listen, we're trying to hit 50 subs by the end of the month. Go ahead and hit that damn button. You already know. I don't even gotta tell you to like, I just have to mention the word like and it puts it in your brain that you can do that. Do you have to? No. Should you? Maybe if you like it, like legitimately do like the content, but it's just the concept of saying the word that gets that put in your mind. See how they do that to you? See how YouTubers kind of hardwire your brain that way? It's fucked up. That's what that is. That's fucked up. But with that being said, let's actually get into part 3. So, the reason I want to make this its own part, and this is very important, okay, this has to be its own part because humanity is a huge topic in part 1 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Now, when I say that, obviously that's reflected in Dio rejecting humanity, and also Jonathan being kind of a representation of the good of all people, but, and like I said, this is a huge topic for specifically JoJo's part 1. Any JoJo videos past this probably won't even have to talk about it, other than part 1 videos. But here's how it is, and this might be kind of a long part as well. So, Jonathan exists as your classic lawful good. He exists to be the sole source of all that is right. Now, I will go ahead and preface this. I usually fucking cannot stand characters that exist that are good just for the sake of being good. Same with people that are evil just for the sake of being evil. Good examples, I hate Frieza. A lot of people like Frieza. I hate Frieza. He just is an asshole. He's just evil. He just is evil. Why? Because he can be. That doesn't work for me. And it works for some people, and that's fine. But I can't do that. Same with beings of pure good. Think early Silver Age Superman, right? Obviously, this has changed over time. Superman is a very complex character now if you really get into all the stories and lore. But in Silver and Golden Age, well, not really Golden Age, in Silver Age comics, back when Superman was like the superhero, he existed to be the hero. Everything he did was right and good. And even if we look back at some of those comics, like, that's fucked up. Why would they do that? It doesn't matter because at the time that was considered justice. Case in point, many racist remarks from Superman at the point in time, which is just due to the writers because of what was natural at the time. So, basically, I hate these kinds of characters, but part 1 handles them really well because they exist as yin and yang. And, again, that's kind of redundant because, the whole point of yin is to be the balance of all good, yang to be the balance of all evil, right? But it's seeing Jonathan being treated the way that he is and seeing him come out as somebody who is good solely because he wants to be is enough of a reason for me. And it's really well handled. Meanwhile, seeing Dio get everything handed to him only to end up being bad because it's in his nature, again, very interesting. But this is not about the dichotomy between these two characters specifically, although it does go hand in hand. Something I would really like to talk about is why Jonathan is the way that he is. And we see the earliest traces of that in the manga, where Jonathan is drowning as a young boy after having gotten a dog that he abused because he was scared of the dog. He did not like the dog. And that dog was, of course, Danny, who he would end up being best friends with. When he first got the dog, he would abuse the dog. He didn't like the dog. He was scared of him. And he was a little shit, basically. He was a little bitch about it. But one day, Jonathan started drowning in a river because he could not swim. And the dog, despite not having a good relationship with Jonathan and not liking him, and knowing that he hurts him, goes in the water and saves Jonathan because it is what he must do. It is the right thing to do. And that gives Jonathan an extreme perspective on life. He realizes how fragile life can be, not only because he almost died, not only because of the tragedies in his life, but because he saw a being that wasn't even human showing humanity. So this makes Jonathan's humanity extreme, very, very important, to the point where this motherfucker literally breathes life with his hamon. Okay? When he uses his powers, he brings life to things around him. And that also kind of ties into that whole Toki thing I was talking about at the beginning, because Toki used his martial arts to heal people. But seeing Jonathan be as human as he is always very interesting, because while he does exist to be, he's just a good guy, that also is to lay the blueprints for every Joestar after him. So you know that the Joestar is always the good guy, even if they're not, technically speaking, a good person. Because the only Joestar that is an objectively good person is Jonathan. And this is all started by his pursuit to be a gentleman. He wants to grow up to be noble, to be a courageous person. And he fully completes that transformation after fighting Bruford. I said it earlier, I think it's Bruford. Hold on, I'm looking this up. I don't give a fuck. You guys. It is Bruford. I was right the entire fucking time. Look at that. Anyways, this transformation is fully complete after the fight with Bruford, where he restores Bruford's humanity, and in turn gets the Sword of Luck and Pluck. Hence the title of this video. Jonathan's journey from Luck, which is the gift of the Joestars because of their protector goddess, the goddess of love. That journey is completed when he gets the Sword of Luck and Pluck after restoring Bruford's humanity, because that's who he is. He is what it means to be human. He is humanity. He is good. And for a brief moment, he brings Bruford back to life, and he gets to see the true humanity in Bruford and gets the sword in return. Hence, finishing his journey that he started all the way back when he was a kid. When he said he wanted to be a gentleman, when he said his goal was to be a noble, brave person. It's completed then. And it's no coincidence that immediately after that, he has the fight with Tarkus, where he gets the final lesson, the will that he inherits from Zeppeli. And after that, he takes on somewhat of a literal transformation, becoming bigger, becoming more stoic. You know, he gets super jacked and loses his shirt, and it's kind of hot. But that literal transformation is to show that growth, that was when he completed his journey. He isn't stoic because he's lost his emotion. He's stoic because of all of the wills that he has inherited, all the missions he must complete. To defeat the mask for Zeppeli, to avenge Zeppeli for Dyer, to restore Dio's humanity for Bruford, and to finish Dio off, to prove to his father that he wasn't incorrect for raising them how he did. And it's also because of that literal transformation. And all of this is where you can see the inspiration from Kinnikuman. I know we talked about inspirations earlier, but I didn't bring up Kinnikuman because I wanted to save it for now. You can see it here. It's not a giant influence like a lot of the other shonen manga at the time, such as Dragon Ball, or hell, even some aspects of Fist of the North Star itself. But here's the deal. In Kinnikuman, there is something special about the main character. Obviously, he's the main character. Has to happen. So, his thing is, he can create miracles through willpower, and has an ability called the Burning Inner Strength. The Burning Inner Strength represents not only his pure willpower personified, but it gets stronger the more will that he inherits. I.e., direct contrast to Fist of the North Star, where Kinshiro has to watch these people die to inherit their will. Every time he defeats somebody in battle, he carries on their mission for them because he knows that he must do it. And all of this in comparison to Jonathan Joestar, where he combines both of those elements. And yes, it's a minor influence, but it is important because part 1 is at its core about the struggle of humanity. You see people wanting power, so they reject their humanity. You see people wanting power, so they bow down and kneel to somebody else instead of fighting for themselves. And then you see Jonathan. Jonathan being the answer to humanity's plight. What is better? To obtain everything for yourself, by yourself, at the cost of losing yourself? Or to work for everything while relying on others, but being able to stay true to yourself? What is better? That is the question that part 1 wants to answer. And that is why humanity at its core is such a big thing for not only Jonathan's character, but part 1 as a whole. And now, we're gonna move into part 4. The final part for this video. And that is, who is Jonathan? So I know what you're thinking. Sienna, we should have been talking about who Jonathan is from the start. That should have been part 1. But you guys don't understand how layered some of these things really are. And some of it is intentional. Some of it's a bit of a reach that Araki didn't even intend. But that's okay. Because that's the nature of interpreting writing. Now, the reason we weren't talking about who Jonathan is because everything before now ties into not only Jonathan himself, but also Part 1, Phantom Blood. We're getting into talking about specifically Jonathan Joestar. So, as I have said previously, the guardian deity of the Joestars is the goddess of love, and this is shown and characterized through Jonathan Joestar. How? Simply because he is a very loving person. He holds love for everybody, even the person he swore he hated the most, he ended up holding love and care for in the end. To the point being where he told his wife to pick up a lost baby on the ship they were on as he was dying and make sure that the baby lived. And one could argue that I should have talked about this a little bit in the humanity part of the video, but simply put, that's what causes his humanity, is his love for people, his love for humanity. But moving on from that, another thing that characterizes him greatly is his pluck, his courage, his bravery, his nobility, and this is because not only was he raised to be a noble, right? That makes sense. But this is simply innate within him, as he is a heroic soul, a heroic spirit. And he is also characterized by his astounding willpower, which is inspired by something I talked about in the last part. This willpower has led him to incredible places. He was able to survive the Joestar Mansion fire by sheer willpower, basically, and luck, but that's because he's a Joestar. That's just what they are. But his luck works differently than other Joestars because his luck is simply not miracles. It is things he puts himself in a situation to have happen. So is it lucky that he got blown out of the Joestar Mansion? Yes, it is lucky. But do you know how that happened? He set himself up for success. He was able to get himself to the first floor, and that is when he was able to get blown out of the window. Was it lucky that the statue was there to kill Dio? Potentially. Didn't, but, you know, for his plan during the mansion fire to get Dio stuck on the spear and have him burn in the fire. Was it lucky that that's where the statue was? Yes, but it's because he was willing to bring himself back down. Every other Joestar has moments of miracles. Jonathan does not. This extreme willpower is seen time and time again throughout this series. Hell, I just brought up the mansion fire at the beginning of the series. Jonathan, willing to kill himself if it meant getting rid of Dio because he was a beast. Jonathan was willing to go to Ogre Street, the most dangerous street. It's basically the hood. It was the hood in 1800s London. That's what the whole thing was. And he was willing to go in there, and he was busting shit out in Chicago. So, you know, he didn't give a fuck. You know, he's eliminating the ops through kindness, mind you. He ended up resolving himself to not only not kill them, but to help them change their ways. Shout out to Speedwagon. Along with many other moments in the series, we could go all day talking about displays of his immense willpower. But nothing characterizes it better then his origin story, how he got to where he is, how he lived as a child. Raised to be a noble, you would think he would be pretentious, you would think he would be snobbish, you would think he would be a dick, but thankfully he did have a good father. And not only that, but he hardened himself to be a gentleman and ended up fighting for other people. Literally the first time you see him in the series, he is fighting for somebody else. But after Dio appears, things get fucked. Things get really bad for him to the point where normal man may commit. Normal man may become evil, scorn the world around him for being outcasted, may even blame themselves, get immensely depressed. Anything could happen, and yet he was able to take the high road. He was able to find love out of nothing. He was able to, despite being an outcast, still hold extreme love for all people and did not blame it on anybody but the root cause being Dio. Never took his anger out on people for no reason, and he was able to keep his head held high even in the worst moments, even when he was depressed, which does kind of tie into something I want to talk about personal for a second. This is side tangent, but when I first read part 1, it really stood out a lot to me because without getting into too much details, obviously, and I'll probably find ways to relate other manga to my struggles over time because it's just easy to relate to media that you consume. I mean, characters are built to be relatable in some way, shape, or form. So I'm sure over time, you guys will learn more, but essentially put, when I was younger, I was also put in a similar position where I had people actively trying to ruin my life and got extremely depressed, and reading part 1 did help me better myself and get out of that space and stop holding anger towards things that didn't matter, stop holding sadness for myself and, people that weren't involved, because at the end of the day, it wasn't my fault, it wasn't anybody else's fault except for the people responsible, and since I was in a position to do nothing about them, you just gotta live, and I'm not gonna get much deeper than that, but it's a real good message to send to people, is sometimes you just have to live. You may not have a reason at that moment, but that's why you find somebody to rely on. And if you can't, you live to find somebody to rely on, because you don't always need a reason. Sometimes you get help until you can find one. But corny shit aside, Jonathan is characterized by his immense willpower to a point where it's damn near inhuman. Another interesting thing about Jonathan is that he is the very essence of the ripple of Hamon. When he is taught it, he catches on extremely quick. He's a very quick learner because, as previously stated, he does represent humanity. He is life, which is why his fucking ripple can breed life. It can create things and help people and heal people, because he is that type of person. He is the embodiment of what it means to master Hamon. And another thing I want to tie everything in this video back to is a statement made very, very early, possibly even in chapter 1. It's either chapter 1 or 2. Something that George states, and that is that every Joestar repays their debts. A Joestar will always repay their debts. And every Joestar does prove that. But Jonathan's way of proving that is, 1, through inherited will, and living to help other people complete their mission, as Erina did for him. Because that's his reason to live, is to help other people. That's the reason he found how he was helped. But also, many a time, he's shown repaying debts, He's indebted to Zeppeli, and the way that he pays that is by destroying the stone mask. He's indebted to his father, and how he does that by, you would think it would be by killing Dio. But that's not how he reconciles with his father. That's not how he truly shows his father that he wasn't wrong. How he does it is in his final moments, where despite everything they've been through, despite how they both treated each other, him and Dio on the ship, as Jonathan holds on to his head in his hands while dying, he feels love for him. He feels remorse for all the things that they have done and that have gotten them to this point. And Dio, despite rejecting his humanity, in that moment, thinks the exact same way. Feels that respect for Jonathan, and feels that had things been better, they both could have made better for themselves. And with that, that's been Jonathan Joestar's journey from luck to Pluck. And here we are. This video has been re-recorded many times because I don't write scripts, and also because recording while your throat's messed up is never a good idea, and yet I'm still doing it anyways because I'm fucking stupid. There's a few things I think I could have talked about in this video, but I kind of want to leave the broader aspects to a part 1 video, like the entirety of Phantom Blood, or maybe like another video on Dio per se. I know that these videos can probably be a little bit rambly, a little bit like how did you get from point A to point B, but that's just the nature of recording without a script, and I would rather have my words be from myself than try to find a way to perfectly convey them, you know? Granted, re-recording and multiple takes still happen, because if there's like a specific thing in my head I want to say, but that's just how it is. But I think that this is a good all-around video for Jonathan Joestar and talking about who he is. I know it does feel weird to have us talking about who he is at the end instead of at the beginning, but because of the layers that part 1 itself has, it's better to learn about all those so that you can kind of keep those in mind when I talk about Jonathan throughout the video. Let me know if y'all want more Jojo videos. As usual, we're trying to hit 50 subs, so if you made it this far, I appreciate you a lot. You're super hot. And also, if you're not subscribed, you should subscribe. If you like the video, you should like it. If you don't like it, you could dislike it, which is better for me in the algorithm. But if you dislike the video, you're probably just not going to do anything, which is respectable. Y'all can leave a comment saying if you'd want me to do more Jojo videos, if y'all would want more character analysis videos, you know, whatever. I think that I'm still trying to get used to how I want to do videos, so the quality is going to be ranging anywhere from good to why would you ever release this, but that's the nature of learning. It's fun. That being said, it's been your girl, King Kiyama, aka the Jojo Shotty, aka the only person who can do a zoom punch in real life, aka Sienna, and I'll see y'all later.